Welcome back, adventurers. Today I'm going to take probably my three most popular videos, how to plot Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 for your D&D campaign, and I am going to consolidate them all into one video. That way it's easier for you to not have to search for all the videos if you ever need to reference these. Now with that out of the way, here is what this video is, or what this outline that I am talking about is. It is a starting point for you as a dungeon master. It is a place for you to take a look at where your session is starting and to start drawing ideas out on paper, physically put them in front of you so that you have a better understanding of where your sessions are going to go 10 sessions from now, 50 sessions from now, 100 sessions from now. Now, this outline should serve as a guide to help you, the Dungeon Master, tell a more cohesive and coherent story. That way you're not going from one session to the next wondering what is going to happen, or bouncing around the story, or just having it feel like your entire story thread is a big ball of yarn. What this outline should be is a place for you to put down your ideas and, most importantly, set a new finish line after every single session. So this outline is a living, breathing document that you should be putting together. So the things that you put down the very first day that you start playing your new Dungeons & Dragons campaign, the things that you put down that day are not the same things that you should be putting down 100 sessions later, because that goal post, that finish line should be moving based on what your players are doing. So what this document is not a railroad. It is not a fixed point in time, and it is not a guarantee for your story. You as the dungeon master and along with your players should become better storytellers, should start to shift the story in new directions based on the actions that other people are taking. So if you look at this Act 1, 2, and 3 video and you say, I'm going to plot out the next 3 years of my campaign, not only are you setting yourself up for failure because railroading just isn't fun for your players, you're doing yourself a disservice by potentially cutting out some really good story threads that you could have pulled on, but you didn't because it wasn't what you wrote down when you first made this outline. So with all of that said, take this outline, use it to give you a starting point, use it to help you set up the rhythm of what the emotional arc of this story, whether it's a one-shot or a campaign that's going to take you 10 years to finish, but finding that rhythm and finding that emotional up and down to gradually bring the story to a close with some thought put into it from one session to the next. Anyways, I hope this video helps you. If you're reading the title and you see Act 1, you're probably thinking, but this isn't a movie or a book, and I'm here to tell you you're wrong. Today we're talking about plotting a campaign like a pro, starting with Act 1. Let's dive in. Welcome back, adventurers. So first of all, if you're trying to run a 100% sandbox game where the story is not dictated by you and you're just more of a referee, this video is not for you. This video is specifically for those DMs out there that are trying to tell a specific story with a focus on narrative. Now, with that out of the way, before we get into this, I want you to start to think of your campaign less like a game and more like a novel or a movie. And of course, like I said, this is only if you want to learn how to tell better stories and put more thought into the narrative. If you prefer a beer and pretzels type of game and you think I'm sucking the fun out of the game with this, that's fine, but you probably wouldn't be here if that was the case. Now, the reason for thinking of your story like a movie or a book is for two main reasons. Because for the most part, the game is set up to be a theater of the mind, which means you have to be able to communicate what is happening in visuals that are easy to relate to and easy for the players to grasp. This helps them from getting bored, and it keeps their internal movies, as I like to call them, running, and it helps immerse them. But also because it gets you thinking in pictures and scenes instead of just encounters and numbers. It helps me. Let me know in the comments if I'm crazy and I'm the only one. So when I say that the intro of your D&D campaign should feel like a movie or a book, it's because chances are that's how your players are seeing it. Fight me on that. Now, first up, let's get one thing clear. You don't have to create a massive world with every detail plotted out. If that sounds overwhelming, or if this is your first game, just paint in broad strokes. I would suggest starting with a small town and going from there. This gives you time to build up the world around your players, and it gives you less work to think about when your players are visiting only a handful of stores versus a city that has dozens. Either way, whatever you end up doing, step one is to pick a location. Now, I'm a visual learner, so I'm going to plot out this entire video for you. In step one, the key is to have just enough detail to whet their appetite for exploration, leaving the rest shrouded in mystery for them to uncover gradually, and, here's the $1 million word, naturally. Don't do expo dumps unless it's 100% necessary. It's like the opening chapter of a book. Give them a taste of the world, but save the full course for later. So in step 1, what you want to do is describe the world they are in, give them a feeling of the tone of the story and the vibe of the world that they're in and that you're setting up. It doesn't have to be scripted, but it's good to be prepared with something just so that you can draw them in, and that way they can understand not only what they're getting into, but also to get a feel for your DM style. So whatever that is, have an intro for them. Trust me, it's good to have this, and it can still be 100% you without being scripted. Now step 2. What I want you to do is think about what your main threat is. This can be summed up more simply to, why are we tuning into this story at this specific time? Is it the characters that are so important? And if so, why? What makes them special? Is it a place in your timeline where something big is about to happen and the players don't know it yet? If there's nothing special that makes this place and time stand out, you need to find one. This is going to be your inciting incident. Now, the inciting incident is the thing that makes your story really begin. Figure out why the players should care about this specific moment in your world and what that thing is going to be that kicks off the story. It should go from a normal world, think of the Shire, and into the story, which is the moment that Frodo is tasked with leaving the Shire. The normal world for you as a DM is really your intro, and the little bit of role-playing that will go on in the first couple of hours. But if you want to let them intro a little longer, this can go into 1 or 2 sessions. However, I would strongly advise to leave the inciting incident as the big mic drop for the end of session 1. Ending the first game on a bang can be a great way to get players really excited to see what happens from there. Now, this inciting incident should set up what the initial conflict of the story is going to be. It can be a big threat, something existential like a necromancer or a world-ending event. It can be something smaller like a crime boss or a horde of orcs, or it can be natural like a plague or natural disaster. It doesn't have to be directly connected to the BBEG if you haven't thought of one yet, and you can always connect them pretty simply later on if you want to make it look like you had it all figured out even when you didn't. But thinking about what the BBEG is going to be now is a good idea, and at the very least you should be thinking about what level you picture the end game being at and what the big climax of your story will be or what you're picturing for that. For right now, the point of step 2 is for something important to happen that directly affects your story and your characters and gets the gears of the game turning beyond that initial you meet in a bar moment. Step 3 is to start planning the trail of trials. The goal of this step is to test their skills, get the players feeling their characters a little bit, but get them interacting and have them facing actual dangers. But at the end of it all, the story needs to get real. I'm talking personal, life-altering. So what do I mean? I mean, if your initial threat is a plague that's been spreading around a local area across a few small villages, players should feel inspired or otherwise nudged in the direction to help figure out a solution to the plague and investigate, or perhaps forced to investigate if one of them is actually sick, or all of them. Then, along the road to those towns and in between their investigations, they will face a series of encounters that are connected to that disease and or the investigation. Whatever they're facing, it should lead them somewhere and put them on a series of initial tasks or trials. In the hero's journey, this is your trail of trials. Let's call these Trial A, Trial B, and Trial C. Feel free to add as many as you like, but the more there are, the longer your Act 1 is, and likewise, the more sessions it will cover. But write down what your story's inciting incident is, and write down what the big personal moment or the point of no return is. If that doesn't make sense, we'll talk about it in depth a little bit. Between them, you're going to have a series of milestones or steps they need to encounter or take in order to get from the intro to the next big plot point, which we will talk about in step 5. For example, a crime boss is extorting people. One of the player's family members was directly involved, so they are in town looking for answers and justice. The other players have their own reasons for wanting to find this boss. Usually it's NPC Bob paid me to or something. This leads the players to running around the town, into the sewers where the crime boss lives like a mole person, and right into the meat of the adventure just like you planned. So in this example, Trial A can be them running into the goons outside of the crime boss's place, or sneaking in. Trial B is their encounter with his army along the way, stopping the enemies whether by combat or guile or whatever. And Trial C can be their confrontation with the crime boss themselves. This should be a sort of first job for them, so be nice to them, especially if they're low level. Raise the stakes more and more with each encounter, with each trial, and make sure that the first hints of the BBEG are getting dropped here and there. But leave lots of mystery because that's what makes the best moments anyways. Spooky voices, visions, or masked enemies are a good way to go without giving too much away in the beginning, especially since you probably have no idea what is going to happen 10 sessions from now anyways. And that brings up a good point. Like I said earlier, make sure you're at least thinking about the BBEG. Think about who they are and ultimately decide what the BBEG wants. If you haven't asked yourself what do they want and what are the steps they need to make that happen, now is the time. Now your players have had a few encounters, they should feel connected to the story, and you have planted the seed for the next big step. And speaking of our heroes, step 4 is to get their backstories flowing as part of the narrative. Why? Because you don't spend time with a party of people and not get to know them. Eventually you start asking questions. Plus, if everyone is keeping secrets and being edgy, it just gets old really, really quick. Your PC backstories are threads that can and should be woven into the narrative. They gave them to you for a reason. A player's search for a lost family heirloom can be tied directly to the BBEG. And for now, at least, they have no idea and only know that they need to get to the ancient ruins or whatever, and you have a trail of trials for them between the intro and the ruins. The important thing is to use a session 0 to discuss these backstories and see if or how you can tie them into the grand scheme of your world. This not only enriches the story, but it also ensures that the players are invested from the very beginning. Also, make sure to prompt them to speak about themselves in their adventures, especially after they've had a few encounters. Help strip away some of the mysteries between them by meeting some special NPCs that start to ask questions, help guide the story, and provide some insight. For example, a mystery doctor asking a player about their condition, or a thief in the night looking for their stuff back are great ways to get the players raising eyebrows and learning about each other's characters just a little bit. And when your players finally get to the Trail of Trials, step 5 is the point of no return. Now this is the end of that chart. By the time you get to this part of your story, your players should be stuck in the story. It should feel personal. For example, maybe during their confrontation in the sewers, they find evidence that hints at a larger conspiracy within the kingdom, and you set up the BBEG as being the monarchy. Or maybe the crime boss utters a name with his dying breath, an ancient necromancer, maybe a name one of your players recognizes. A great way to make it personal is to tie this part into their backstories. Bring up that long lost brother, the parent that's supposed to be dead, or finding out Uncle Ben died and now you want to make a costume to swing around the city and get revenge. Whatever you do, this is the hook that cements their path forward. It should make the narrative pivot in a direction that's clearly pointing to the heart of your campaign. This is where the stakes heighten. Your players aren't just adventurers anymore. They're chosen by fate, entangled in events much bigger than they imagined. Remember, step 2 was to ask, why am I telling this story? And it should be because it connects to the main characters somehow. Now the story is clear. You throw in some random encounters between travel if you need some extended sessions, or if you're like me and you forgot to prep for a day or just want to run an encounter to get away from the burnout. Trust me, I get it, and it happens, and you have yourselves at least 20 sessions, probably more, of introduction and setup. You can throw in some lighthearted episodes to bring tension down between big plot points like festivals or holidays, or just good old-fashioned shopping. And you can enhance your world by adding NPCs that they interact with and probably fall in love with along the way, becoming best friends, and through rumors, town criers, guards, and more, you can drop hints of the larger story at play and present smaller threads to pull them off track and give you and the story time to breathe as story gets revealed more and more. At the end of the day, as we wrap up Act 1, remember this crucial point. The introduction isn't just about setting up the story. It's about setting up the players as the central characters of that story. Their decisions, their backgrounds, their motivations, they all start with you, but it's the characters that will carry on the story throughout the entire campaign. All of that is so that by the end of the intro phase, your players should feel anchored in the world with personal motivations that align with the unfolding story. They should be intrigued by the mysteries you've presented and compelled to peel back the layers of your world. So really quick, let's take a look at an example I just created right now because I know it helps some viewers more to see actual examples. So step 1, the setting is a small coastal village known for its mysterious folklore and its uncharted nearby islands. The players are initially drawn to the village by different personal motives. Again, this is probably NPC Bob paid me to be here. If you really want to make it special, tie in their backstories to one of the islands or the local town. Step 2, why do we care? Well, as they explore the village and interact with its inhabitants, they uncover clues about a long-lost civilization and a legendary artifact rumored to be buried in the island's depths. However, the village also harbors a secret, a cult, that seeks to harness the artifact for their ominous purposes. Now, as they're exploring the town, a comet swings by, and its presence activates the artifact on one of the distant islands. The players witness a beam of light that shoots into the night sky on the horizon, something that the locals have never seen before, and the cult performs a dark ritual or steals a ship or something that gets them moving, because now they have a motive. What this does is it sets up that not only is this something that has never been seen before, making this point in time very special, but it is also something that is intriguing to the players and will probably get them to want to go investigate. Now step 3 is the players must now decide whether to venture to the island to seek the artifact before the cult does. Now if you really want to get them moving, have the cult attack them or something like that, or have somebody be attacked in broad daylight and have the players step in, and now they're involved with the cult and feel even more compelled to actually stop them. Since they can have a few different options here, I would start by having the local mayor or lord offer them money to investigate. That usually does the trick, but if one of the players is being broody and not taking the bait, then we jump into step 4 and connect their backstory to the event somehow. So the Trail of Trials might be Trial A, the players must steer their ship through a dense fog that blankets the sea near the island. Hidden among the fog are jagged rocks requiring requiring the navigation and teamwork, right? Along the path they are sailing, they are attacked by Marrow and must help the crew fight off the creatures. Trial B is an ambush in the jungle. As the players are moving through the jungle, they are ambushed by cultists that are camouflaged among the foliage. After they fight off the ambush, players then come across a cult ritual in progress. They can choose to stealthily gather information, disrupt the ritual, or attempt to capture a cult leader for interrogation. Whatever the case, this leads them to the ruins in the center of the island, which is Trial C. In the heart of the island, players find the ruins with inscriptions in an ancient language. Deciphering these correctly reveals the hidden entrance to an underground chamber, and this place is also crawling with more cultists, giving them more of a challenge if you need it. If they seem to be having fun, or if it already feels like it's challenging enough, get rid of the cultists, let them just walk right in. Once they're inside the ruins, they find that the ruins are actually guarded by animated statues that will not let anyone pass. As for step 4, connecting their backstories, if they have a lost brother, well, their brother came to them in a dream and told them to go to the island. If they're running from the law shows up in town and chases them towards the island. If they're seeking an ancient artifact, well, guess what's on the island suddenly? Find a way to connect them if the story needs a little guidance or if they need a push, but usually with the session 0, everyone should be on the same page and going with the flow until they get a better feel for their characters. Trial D, at the heart of the cavern lies the artifact guarded by a mystical creature bound to protect it. Players must defeat the guardian and take hold of the artifact. I would probably make this like a wolf or a panther or something cool like that, just to make it feel like next level encounter, not just a cultist. And finally, step 5, now that they have the artifact, this kickstarts the next step, which is the point of no return. Upon securing the artifact, it activates, projecting a holographic map. This map shows locations across the continent, each marked with an ancient symbol. One of the players recognizes a symbol on the map. It's related to their lost family's crest, hinting that their family history is intertwined with the artifact's legacy. As they witness this, a new enemy walks in, the cult leader, who is a powerful sorcerer. This is a sort of boss fight and climax for the island adventure. Once they defeat the sorcerer, they head back to the town where news of the player's deed spreads, attracting interest from various factions. One of the kingdom's lord's envoys seeks their help, while a thieves guild now wants to steal the artifact for its power. Now you've set in motion some big events. The larger world and their enemies know who they are, which forces the party to stick together for safety, and you have connected at least 1 or 2 character stories, and they have an idea of what's in motion even if they aren't really fully aware of what it is yet. Now, if I really wanted to space this out between the trials, I might have some random ocean encounters, or a jungle encounter once they reach the islands. They might meet a strange NPC on the island that offers them help, or encounter a pirate crew that is also on the island looking for the artifact. On their way out, they can find some smaller ruins if I want to pull them off track or make it feel like the island has more history to offer. The point is, the main beats are plotted, you know where you're going, your players have a direction, and even if things go off track, you have a plan and you can very easily guide things right back onto the track. And most importantly, you have set the stage for the second act. The whole point of Act 2 is to escalate the stakes, right? I heard it once said that Act 1 is putting your characters in a tree, Act 2 is setting that tree on fire. On that same note, Act 3 would be getting them out of that tree. Now, Act 2 is not about just introducing the world and the immediate threats anymore. That's small world stuff, right? By the beginning of Act 2, the world is bigger, the story is bigger, the stakes are bigger. So our goal for this breakdown is to learn how to deepen the conflict, introduce complex subplots, and challenge your players with, moral dilemmas and intricate puzzles that are going to test not just their skills, but their characters' beliefs and their motivations. Once you can do that, the story becomes personal to them, and it gives them something to fight for and a reason to care about the world that you've created. So now that's all great and dandy, but how do you actually go about doing that? Well, the beginning of Act 2 is about exploration and expansion. Your players are now familiar with your immediate setting, the one that you have set up, and what they want to know is what lies beyond. So your goal as a DM is to expand their world, introduce these new locations that are not just geographically diverse, but also very culturally rich, right? Each new area should offer unique challenges, it should offer opportunities for your characters to grow, and it should show the history of your world little piece by little piece. In the island example from part 1, the journey so far, they have seen an inciting incident that called them to adventure, and they had to go to this island with the mysterious light. They were tested on that road as a newfound party, and they have a good understanding of what the initial threat is now. They've seen the artifact. At least they understand who or what aims to stand in their way, right? In my example, the threat is that newly discovered sorcerer and their cult, and also the thieves guild that might want the artifact for themselves, or the local lords if they want it for themselves as well. You also need to think that there's also mystery involved because they don't know what the cult actually wants, right? They just know that the cult wants this thing that they found on the island. Now, the goal when breaking up Act 2 is to get your players to what is called the innermost cave in the hero's journey, and eventually at the end of that journey, get them to the midpoint of the whole story, right? In Star Wars: A New Hope, Luke enters this moment when he decides to trust the Force and not the computer. He takes that leap of faith. But he doesn't just go there, he has to be led there. He has to lose Ben Kenobi first, right? Spoilers. So step 1 is setting up more tests, more enemies, more allies. That is literally the first part of the second act of the hero's journey. It is tests, enemies, and allies. So at this point, if this was my game, if I was actually running this game, I would be laying more breadcrumbs through a new sort of main quest, quote, end quote. In our island example, the party has the artifact, this hologram that went off when they touched the artifact, projected maybe a mysterious map, and this might compel them to go visit a neighboring city or a country or some expert for information. Now, the best case scenario for this example is the party actually feels compelled to look for more information because they're all directly involved, right? They're wanted by the Lord or the cult or the Thieves Guild, or they're connected to the storyline because the artifact is somehow connected to their backstory. And now they need to stick together for safety because the world that they know is at stake, whether that means it's just the local town or if it's literally a world-ending event. That would be best case scenario. So they take their first steps as a real party or a real unit, right? And along this new road, as they're discovering what comes after the first act, there's going to be new NPCs that they meet. And remember that the whole point of Act 2 is that they need to feel tested. They need to feel like they're involved in something that's bigger than themselves now. They might meet a new enemy in this process, a knight who is honor-bound to retrieve the artifact at any cost and bring it back to the local king or queen or whatever. They might meet a master assassin that's working for the guild that also wants it because they were sent there. Or the sorcerer turns out to be just a henchman of some grander master of the cult, and they're in the process of finding that out. They might also meet some amazing NPCs to lighten that load, to lighten the story and the road that they're taking, right? They might come across a shopkeeper that was once an adventurer. They might meet a cleric that has some answers to all their questions and offers to help them and, you know, in many ways becomes their savior or their mentor. In the island scenario that I created, I would test the party, have them meet some awesome NPCs that can point them in the right direction towards a master. Let's call him the Weaver. This cleric happens to know the master and has answers that they're seeking, so this cleric points them to a far-off city, and now you have a new quest, a new goal, get to that city, right? And all of this is still the beginning of Act 2, right? This is still within the bullet point on the chart that would be tests, enemies, and allies. They are on the way to travel to meet this Weaver, whoever they are, at a library far away in some distant country, and when they arrive after encountering, you know, X amount of things that you want to put in along that road. It could be a day away. It could be 4 hours away. It could be weeks away. However long you want to make the campaign, however long you want to stretch that journey, that's up to you. But the point is, everything that happens along the way is them meeting more allies, meeting more enemies, or facing more tests, and just raising the stakes a little bit, right? So when they finally do get to this Weaver person, he tells the party that the artifact is part of an ancient and forgotten war, and that the map in the hologram is actually pointing them to an arcane seal that was used to hold a great evil at bay, an elder god that has been sealed away. Now, the Weaver might inform them that this cult is known to them, that they know what the cult is looking for, that the cult is seeking to restore an elder god to power. Now the world is growing, the stakes are higher, and they know why the cult needs the artifact, right? Another mystery checked off. Then the Weaver informs the party that the item will be safe with his order, and they can leave it with him. Now, at this point, the party might feel a weight lifted, and obviously that's not the end of the story. This is just the beginning of Act 2. This would be a good moment for them to have some downtime, because remember, we want the party to have those ups and downs of that roller coaster as part of the story. If they're always stressed, it becomes a task, not a game. If they're always stress-free, then it teeters on being low stakes and easy, and if that's what you want, then that's great, but if you want to challenge your players, you know, definitely want to get that up and down to get the emotional roller coaster going. Now, it's your job to decide what the right balance is. How much stress and how much freedom, how much fun do you want? You know, it's up to you to determine what level of story and how high the stakes are for this. And you should set that up with your party and figure that out on your side, because maybe your players don't want something that's going to stress them out or be super involved like that. And that's something that you need to talk with them about. Now, whatever the case, the party did their job. They found the artifact, they brought it back, and they've left it with this Weaver. So in their eyes, they're done. So maybe they spend some time shopping. They go to the local springs, or they go drinking, or whatever. But once that's wrapped up, suddenly they see smoke rising from that same library. It's under attack. Now they have to decide if they want to let it happen or if they want to get involved. Now, if they rescue the artifact, that means that they probably feel like they have to take it themselves, because newsflash, it wasn't actually as safe as they thought. This is where you insert the boss fight encounter at the Great Library, and this could be an amazing level. You could really go into the map design, into the encounter, make this challenging, make this the first real encounter that they have to face with a greater power. Now, once that encounter is all done, once it's all said and done, they'll probably going to feel like the artifact is safer with them. Or the Weaver gives it to them with his dying breath, entrusting it to them, right? And with his dying breath, he tells them that there's a book that has an ancient ritual in it that can not only destroy the artifact, but also seal the Elder Evil away forever. This book, however, happens to be sealed away in a tomb with the author. He gives them a location, and then he dies. Now remember, in Lord of the Rings, Frodo could have left the ring in Rivendell and let them figure it out, but he knew it was his destiny, for better or worse. Frodo approached the innermost cave at the Council of Elrond, and he came out of it braver and stronger because he chose to take on the burden of the ring. He chose to put aside his own fear, his own emotions, and take on that role as ring bearer. Now, your characters are like Frodo. They're going to have that same oh shit moment at the end of this step. They need to actively make the choice to finish this. The characters have to choose to see this through, or they need to be forced into it. Now, when they do that, they have taken that leap of faith. They know now that it is their duty, it's their destiny. They have to see this through to the end. The party has gone into the innermost cave. They have looked in themselves and they found a deeper calling. They are heroes. They are adventurers, right? This is going to make them feel like the main characters. Now, remember, all of that we just talked about was only step 1 of Act 2. So you can see how this one singular step might be broken down into multiple steps depending on encounters or whatever. We're going to plot out here on our graph tests, allies, and enemies. It's sort of a mini trail of trials, and along the way, there's even a boss fight if you want to make that library an epic moment. So we have test 1, which can be an encounter with the Thieves Guild or whoever. Meeting an ally is the cleric. Test 2 can be the lords or a cultist attack. And at the end of that, the enemies attack at the library, and then they reach the next step, which is the innermost cave, the moment they decide to take the artifact and see it through to the end. So the next step then, step 2 of this video, is the road to the midpoint, which is also a sort of false hope moment. At this point, you want to think about how your story is going to shift after this step. Will an ally of theirs become their enemy? Will the world suddenly fall into a world-shattering event? In this island scenario, I might be hiding the fact that that awesome cleric they met that sent them to the Weaver is actually secretly in league with the cult. And I'm actually going to roll with that, so let's keep that in mind. Now, for step 2, you have another series of tasks and trials. The tomb they seek is in another land, in some ancient ruins, so now they have to travel there, and this is a dangerous road. The characters that they meet along that road and the encounters they have are going to mimic the darkening story. This is going to be another series of tasks or trials. Now, trial 1 in this case is the Thieves Guild attacks again, except this time it's in full force, right? You want to keep those threats alive and remind your players that those threats are still a constant thing because they have made enemies. Then trial 2, they encounter a strange beast they have never seen before, and this would be a really great place for like a dragon or some sort of other powerful being, maybe a hag. But the idea is to not always encounter something that's intelligent, encounter things that are part of the environment they're in, something that would be in this forest or this valley or wherever it is that they're traveling through. And then trial 3 would be the sorcerer finds them. The one that they met on the island in Act 1 finds them. They face off with him at last, right at the entrance to the tomb, because remember, even though we have some encounters, it should always be a step closer to that overarching story. So now we move to step 3 of plotting Act 2, which is the ordeal. So once they defeat the sorcerer, the cleric shows up. He pretends to have been a captive of the sorcerer. The party, already having built trust with him, obviously helps the cleric out. They unlock the tomb, and then the cleric turns on them. He tells them that he needed them to open the tomb for him, and when he does, that great evil inside awakens. They haven't fully set it free, because that would be crazy and would ruin pretty much the rest of the story if it really just came down to the villain winning that quickly. But now, that villain is one step closer to the world-ending event, and it's all the party's fault. Now the world plunges into an eternal night or something, and the cleric might even try to take the artifact from them, fight them for it. And even if they are able to restrain the cleric or even kill him in the end, the cleric can leave with some badass line like, "There's no stopping it now," or "You did everything according to plan." And now they should be really scared. This is the midpoint on the chart. This is what we wanted to reach. The midpoint on the chart can be anything, but it should be a complete 180 of the adventure so far and really set the tone for the last half of the story. So for example, if you want a horror game, this is the moment things get really scary. Step 4 is a sort of recovery phase. They still have their mission. So in this example, the midpoint is not only the fact that they accidentally let loose the main bad guy, who has now gotten one step closer to being unleashed. Think of it like Voldemort in The Goblet of Fire. They're around, but he's in a tiny, creepy little fetus body, so he's not really that much of a threat, but the fact that he's even around is just one step closer to the oh crap, Now step 4 is a sort of recovery phase. They still have their mission. They've defeated the cleric, they go into the ruins, they solve some puzzles, they find the tomb that they were looking for that the the Weaver sent them to, and they recover the book. Mission accomplished. They did the thing they set out to do. Now this part should feel less like a challenge, right? You want to give them a bit of a win here because they just got their asses kicked. So they get the book, they make their way out and decide it's time to go back to where it all started to regroup their home, whether that's a city or a town or wherever the adventure started. They might even decide to seek help from the king or queen or the council or whoever, because they're in over their heads at this point and they should be assembling their allies. So of course, because of the cleric, they might have trust issues, and I mean severe trust issues, and that's all part of the game, right? You want them to be second guessing everything because they don't know who to trust, and they really shouldn't be trusting everybody, especially with something as important as this artifact. Now the road back can be filled with some encounters. This could be more of a side quest and less about challenging the players. They are in their darkest moments here. This is the first real loss, and every win is going to help in building back their confidence, and you want them to build back their confidence. And this is a good segue for us because going into that last step, step 5 of Act 2, is the reward. This is where the narrative reaches a sort of boiling point. Perhaps a great god or a goddess shows up in their time of need because this being has been watching them and it's seen their willingness to fight the darkness, and one of the players might have a dream about their deity because remember, we should be tying in their backstories. So on the chart, the next bullet point that we put down is the reward, where one of the characters has a dream where their deity speaks to them about the greater good and the need to keep going, you know, blah blah blah. The idea is to pair this world-shattering moment for them with a sense of hope. Otherwise, what's the point? For Frodo, this moment is the bridge of Khazad-dûm. The midpoint of the film is when Gandalf falls to the Balrog. But when they meet the elves of Lothlorien that give them rest, guidance, and even supplies, that's that moment of hope. They may feel lost, but they have a sense of what the next steps are. The mission is in jeopardy, but it's not over. Now things might change from here because now we're entering the beginning of the road back. And the main point here is that although they may be going back home, they are not the same heroes they were when they left. Act 2 ends with a sense of dread, but also a feeling of we have to finish this. In Lord of the Rings, spoilers ahead by the way, the story ends with the death of Boromir. But Frodo has Sam. There's a sense of sadness because of the way the movie ends, but we also know as viewers that as long as Frodo has Sam, there's hope for the quest. Now things are at their darkest now for your party. Act 2 is setting up the final boss, setting up that fight, and every moment should now reflect that. It might end in their hometown, a new city, or wherever, but they should have a plan, or at least beginning to make a plan. They should have some hope. They have tools. They have to regroup and rethink, and the deity could totally offer them, by the way, this is how you defeat him, and just give them the things that they need to do. Or, for example, in Critical Role, they had to go and find the vestiges, right? That's what gave them the power, at least gave them enough power to have the hope of ever defeating Vecna, even if it wasn't a big chance. Now, the coolest part of this moment, this dark moment for them before they go to officially challenge the next thing or whatever, is that they have time to level up so that the next time they face the cult or the cleric or whoever, they'll be ready, and it'll make that ending all the more satisfying because this time they're going to be able to pack more punch and be more effective in the fight, and it'll feel like they've grown, which will help in making the characters feel like they've grown. Now, obviously this is a big picture, and if you want to have a full campaign, you would be throwing in side quests and little threads here and there for them to pull on, because these are the steps for Act 2, but it might take 6 months to go through because they're also going to go visit that vampire's lair, and they heard about a treasure over in that goblin's den. They might take X step and go to place A, B, and C, but whatever the case, you still know that the midpoint of the story is the midpoint of the story, and however many steps it takes for them to get to that point, you have a direction. Again, having that direction is what helps kind of guide the overarching narrative, and it's up to you to decide how many encounters and how many sessions you want to have between all of that. So just go into it knowing that obviously this is a condensed version of what your entire Act 2 would look like, and there could very well be multiple stories and multiple bosses, but at the end you should be thinking about that big boss and that big midpoint and how you're going to get your players from that first step and all the way through to the end of Act 2. So anyways, that's how I plot Act 2. So to summarize sort of everything, you have step 1 with new tests, new enemies, more allies to really build up the world. Then you have a defining moment where the stakes suddenly raise. For us, it was the death of the Weaver and the attack on the library. And the party then enters the innermost cave because things just got really bad, and now they feel like they have to be the ones to see this through because this is their destiny. This is where the party feels like the main characters. Then you have step 2, which is the false hope. You have another series of trials that send them on on what they think is going to solve the big problem. Another quest. For us, this was them going to the tomb of the author of the book that has the ritual that can end the cult's plans. All of this leads up to the midpoint. Now, the midpoint here was when the cleric decided to turn on them, and they also accidentally plunged the world into eternal night. This is where things get flipped on them, and maybe the whole world gets flipped, you know? Things are really bad, but they finish the mission, and afterwards in step 4, they have a moment of quiet, a breath before that plunge. Now, this is the dip downwards in the story. Tension drops even though the stakes are at their highest. They see the mission through, they make their way to the next destination, whether that's home or some other place, but it feels like it was for nothing because the midpoint still happened. So this is where you step up and you build back their confidence. They get a little bit stronger. That's the whole point of step 4, is sort of building them back up, making them feel more prepared, maybe even level them up. And then they get to the final step. Once they have sort of been challenged a little more, they've been tested a little bit more, they get their reward or the boon. They have a weapon or a power or a gift or a new ally, or, you know, the deity in our example comes down and talks to them and gives them the next steps. That way, even though things are dark, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. All they have to do is walk towards that exit. They have hope. Now they are looking ahead at Act 3 with a feeling of, well, here we go, and maybe at the end of it all, they'll come out on top. Act 3 is all about the resolution to your story, obviously. This is where everything boils together. Stakes are at their highest, the story might feel its darkest, and it all starts with the road back. The party is defeated, they are probably afraid, and this next step is all about them deciding to take the road back home, back to the threat. It's the decision to finish the fight, the decision to be on the offensive and face things head on. For me, this might be a good time to insert a time jump or give the party some downtime. This gives the party a chance to regroup and breathe after facing the stark reality of the midpoint that you set up for them. Now, the road back is the launching point of your Act 3 and the final stretch for your party. Obviously, that means that while they might feel like they are ready, there are more challenges coming, and the light at the end of the tunnel is farther away than it looks. So let's take a look at our chart for Act 3. At the beginning, we have the road back. Now, in our Act 1 and Act 2 examples, the party had found a book in an ancient tomb. So maybe they finally decipher the clue that you left them and translate the book and have a list of ingredients to create a powerful weapon or an arrow of some sort or a summoning circle or whatever and lock this demon up again. Well, that gives them a mission. Between this road back step and the next step, which is called the rescue, there should be a series of increasingly difficult challenges. Are you seeing a common thread here between all the acts? Each of those challenges should serve the greater story. In Avatar: The Last Airbender, Act 3 starts with Aang defeated. And almost as if done on purpose, hint hint, it's also Book 3, Fire, Episode 1. Several weeks have passed. Aang has failed his mission. He literally bears the scars from his encounter with Zuko and Azula that almost killed him. The road back for Aang is not easy, and he remains in hiding for most of it. His challenges on the way back were many. He hadn't mastered firebending, he wasn't trusting himself, and most of all, he'd lost hope. Aang's road back began when he decided to put aside his ego and remain hidden from the world instead of wanting to prove to everybody that the Avatar was alive and well. This challenge for him was internal, but he also had to master firebending and help the others with a plan for defeating the Fire Lord. This took him to the Fire Nation where he met and encountered lots of different people. Those were his challenges. That was his road back. So let's lay out 3 bullets under the road back, challenge 1, 2, and 3, but this can be as many as you want. Challenge 1 should feel like the small step forward. Test your players with a new enemy. In my example on the road back, the players pass through a town where they suddenly see cultist activity. Secret symbols on doors and figures with markings they recognize, icons around their necks. Anything you want as long as it points back to the big baddie. So, for my example, this sets off my party's alarm bells and probably piques their curiosity. It also shows them how much activity the main bad guy has started, reminds them of their mission, and it makes them feel like that bad guy is much more powerful because they are everywhere now. Now, you can either have them encounter the cultists directly and just go straight to fighting the cultists and stopping their plan, or what I would do is have the Thieves Guild that's been looking for them jump them suddenly. Now, the reason I would do this is because this is surprising to the party. It keeps the threat of the other enemies real, and it makes it feel like the world is moving around the party instead of the encounters moving around to their story. That's just how I would do it. So challenge 1 for me is the Thieves Guild returns. Once they defeat the Thieves Guild, and I want to make a note here that they should defeat the Thieves Guild, because at this point the Thieves Guild are small fry to them, right? And defeating them for the 3rd time will really increase their confidence, and it will increase their renown in the world. Then there's challenge 2, where they can go see what the cult is doing, find out they're doing this local ritual, finding magical practitioners and kidnapping them, only to sap their strength and then feed it to the big enemy they released, and they're trying to restore him to power. So the party stops them, thwarts the plans, but the big baddie, let's call him Dolrot. He's an ancient demon or something. Dolrot appears to them as an apparition, having already been partially restored, and he's getting stronger by the day. So the party leaves town to make it back to the big city to call on their allies. On the way out, you can have them encounter something crazy like a dragon if you haven't done that, and every party loves to fight a dragon. Or you can pull them 100% off track with an interdimensional visit or something like that. I once had my party find a book that completely sucked them into it. Getting out of the book was an adventure on its own, and it really solidified the final challenge for them. They really felt like they could do anything after that. So whatever your challenges are, have those laid out, and just know that those challenges are the beats that you want them to hit before they move on to the next step, which is step 2. And speaking of step 2, we have the rescue, or the rescue from without. Now, in Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces, the rescue from without is a really important part and pivotal to the character's growth. So in step 2 for the campaign, the heroes may find themselves in a situation where they literally need rescuing. Now, in this case, you have 2 options. One, it can be that the 3rd challenge really proved itself as a tough task, depending on what it was. It could be a lieutenant or an enemy. They went into another dimension that was just too dangerous, or they encountered a new foe. In order to succeed, they might need the aid of a goddess, as with before, which is honestly a great thread to pull on, especially if it connects to someone's backstory, since it will again solidify that specialness that they're feeling and really make them feel like they are the main characters and that they are the heroes that the world needs. Or 2, in the case of my heroes, in my example, returning to the city, this help can literally be the party begging the queen for her armies, and the queen deciding that she's going to help them. Either one can be epic in its own way. Whatever you decide, the party has an ally somewhere, and it evens the playing field. That's the whole goal here, is that now things are level, and they have a solid chance against defeating this big baddie, Dolrot. But more than that, this is the moment when the party goes from, I don't think we can do this, to we have to do this. Now, I know that sounds kind of like one of the steps in Act 1, the innermost cave, but in Act 1, that moment for the party was a we have to do something kind of a moment. But the difference here is that now, in the middle of Act 3, is when they decide we are the only ones that can do something. Now, this moment for them is step 3 on your chart. This is crossing the final threshold. This is the deep breath before the plunge, as Gandalf put it. So pack in an epic speech from the queen, or an uplifting message from their deity, or the NPC they thought was dead comes to aid them. Give them a boost of emotion that they need, and we go to the next step, step 4. Now, there's a few ways that the party can go. They will either be very gung-ho about it, or very trepidatious and scared of taking that final plunge and fighting the big bad. They have help, so the party's morale is probably boosted, but the tension doesn't dissipate, it escalates. Now is the time to underscore the enormity of the challenge ahead, reminding the players and their characters that the fate of the world, kingdom, or realm, or whatever rests on their shoulders. So you can go at your pace and the party's pace, add some encounters here, or you just jump right into the next step, the big moment, and that is step 4, decision time. So in my example, step 4, Dolrot reappears, an image in the sky hundreds of feet tall, and he warns the world of his resurrection and the coming doom. Show how powerful they have become and how dark things are, and if you want your party to move, this is a great way to add a ticking time bomb to the story. If Dolrot's armies appear, the party has no choice but to act. Or you can insert a magical portal that is sucking things up, and it's only a matter of time before the world goes, or something like that. Light a fire under the party and get the climax going when you are ready. This is also probably the party's last chance for some downtime, so make sure that they know that, and if they need it, give it to them. Step 4 is really all about introducing those final hurdles, and more importantly, it's about allowing your party to plan the final assault. Let them plan. This planning phase is critical for them because it makes them feel like they're in control, especially in control of their destiny. And it gives them a moment to strategize based on the knowledge and resources that they have accumulated throughout the campaign. This really does make them feel like things are ramping up, so let your players do that. Whether they choose a direct attack or a stealth mission to weaken the enemy's forces, or a magical endeavor to bolster their own powers, like that magical book that they found in the tomb, each choice should have a consequence and require very careful consideration from you as a DM. So plan accordingly, because this is it. This is the final fight. So have a plan for each direction they might go and figure out a way to bring it back to that main final point, and that is step 5, right? Now, between step 4 and step 5, you have those final challenges. This can be Dolrot's officers, his armies, his beasts, whatever. They can also be physical barriers, mountains, enemy outposts, moral dilemmas that challenge their commitment to this. If they want to get to that in time, they have to let this town burn. Something like that really, really makes them see the bigger picture and have to make those really hard decisions. These final challenges serve as the last hurdles for your party before the main event, and ideally are on the way to the climax, literally as they're moving to the climax. They're also super crucial for setting the tone of what the climax is going to be like. This is your chance to make them feel very afraid or very heroic or whatever. Set the tone for them through these challenges. If they take a boat to the final battle, test them at sea. If they're on a skyship, have some air encounters. Test their strategy, test their resolve, make it hard. They have to feel the weight of the adventure at this point. And when you finally get them through those final challenges, however many you set out, then we have step 5, bum bum bum, the climax. This is the moment of truth for your party. The climax is the confrontation with Dolrot, in my example, the ancient demon, in a battle that has been building since the campaign's inception. This battle should feel epic in scale. It should involve not just the party, but also their allies, right? The Queen's armies, or the skyships, or whatever. It should also involve the strategies they've devised and the personal growth of each character. This is where, in the video for Act 1, I said you need to think in terms of a movie or a book. What did you envision this fight like? Is it in a sea of lava? On a broken moon? The environment plays a crucial role, and whether it's Dolrot's lair or a mystical battlefield or the heart of the city that they're trying to save or whatever, the setting should add to the tension and the dramatic stakes of the encounter and paint a visual picture for them. If they are in the city, they have thousands of people to think about. This can be part of the encounters that test them. If they are somewhere on some magical battlefield or in space or on an asteroid, the battlefield can be unlike anything they've encountered so far, which will go a long way to setting this battle apart from every other one they've had. Now, the battle with Dolrot should push the party to their limits, requiring them to use every skill, every spell, and every tactic that they've learned. You might also think about incorporating elements that highlight each character's strength, giving them moments of individual heroism or teamwork, right? Make the barbarian have to save people by stopping a giant boulder, or introduce a magical barrier that only the wizard can get through. The fight should also have phases, with Dolrot revealing new powers or tactics that forces the party to adapt and overcome the challenges. And now, super important, this is also where you should decide how high the stakes are. Do you want a TPK to be possible? And if not, you should have a plan in place for what to do if a player drops to 0 and fails all of their saves. And if and when victory seems just out of reach, then you trigger the turning point. When you trigger that turning point, Dolrot's boasting and threats turn to fear, disbelief, anger. This could be the result of the party's actions earlier in the campaign, like with that spellbook. Or it could be a sacrifice made by a beloved character, right? An NPC that decides to sacrifice themselves for the players, or a player that decides to sacrifice themselves for the party. It could be a plan that they devised that is now succeeding, or a trap that they put together. Or even divine intervention would be an epic way to turn the tide, especially in this example, since one of my characters has a deity protecting them. And it really is an epic way to sort of set that final moment in the story, just saying. Whatever the case, trigger that turning point and start to give the players the feeling that the battle is going in their favor. Things around them should start to shift. If you have dark skies, light starts to break through. If you're on this crazy asteroid, maybe it starts to break apart, right? Think about that. Think about the different stages of the battle and think about how that's going to affect them and make them feel. When you do that, then you get to the final step, the resolution. Now, this is the big epic conclusion to the fight. Allow the party to celebrate their victory, reflect on their journey, have the bad guy say some really sad things like, "Oh, I can't believe this is happening," or whatever. Then, the NPCs approach them, and then old friends come up to congratulate them, and there's tears for the people that died there, and there's a moment of surveying the aftermath and a moment of silence. This could also be where the battlefield actually starts to collapse and they need to run and get the hell out of there. One final challenge, This is the time for rewards. And I don't mean just in terms of treasure and accolades, but also in personal growth for the characters and the impact of their victory on the world. Every single party should feel like they did something for the world or changed it somehow Otherwise, we failed at that first initial question in Act 1, which is why are we tuning in now? The story focused on this party for a reason, and this is the moment where it becomes apparent. There's no better way to give that feeling of accomplishment than with an epilogue. Write one for each player, or let them talk about what they do after the big fight. This can honestly be its own session, since the boss fight may take 1 or 2 or more. This can involve a ceremony in their honor, the rebuilding of devastated lands, the dawn of a new era of peace and prosperity. The legacy that they left behind and their heroism should be felt in the world that they've saved. And it should leave a lasting mark on the story that you have all crafted together. Now, obviously, you could set up some loose ends for future adventures, or let them retire peacefully, now just NPCs in your broader world. And whether this road was 20 sessions or 200 sessions, you did it. So this is how I plotted my games. I really honestly hope it helps you plot your games. Leave a comment how you plot your acts. Maybe it's different than mine. That's totally fine. This is just how I do it because I have a background in screenwriting and it's what I love to do. And now it's time for some quick shoutouts. King Siffy says, Tobias really should be wearing a seatbelt. And you know what, King Siffy, I 100% agree with you. I don't care who started it. I will turn this car around. Rebelmax VQ8KG says, for the gremlin, not sure his or her name, it's Tobias. Tobias the gremlin. Tobias the displacer kitten gremlin. And Mike Connie 2270 says, Tobias spotted at 19 minutes and 45 seconds. Great video. Big fan of the channel here. I'm a big fan of you, Mike. I'm a big fan. I think I've said this. I might have called this one out before in a previous video. And you know what? My feelings for you haven't changed, Mike. So if you really, truly love me, find me. Meet me in Montauk like we said we would 12 years ago. Now, if you were paying attention in today's video, leave a timestamp in the comments down below with where you saw Tobias in this video. And you just might get shouted out in the next one. As always, thank you so much for watching. Forge on, my friends. And we'll see you next time, adventurers.